something, and we'll try and fix that. I appreciate the Virgin Valley Historical Committee doing this. It is an important thing to do. I'm happy they're going throughout the whole valley and capturing some of the things from different parts of the valley, different communities, even though we're all historically been one valley community. I would like to, before we get to the young ladies tonight, I'd like to start off with just a little bit of biographical that many of you won't know and they aren't going to tell you. Thelma Abbott is the oldest one here. She had her 91st birthday yesterday. She was born January 25th, 1915 in Beaver Dam at her home. Her grandmother's a midwife. She married Reuben Sidney Abbott, who was the son of William Abbott and Mary Jane Abbott of Mesquite. They moved to Las Vegas, I believe in the early 1940s, where he had a job on the Union Pacific Railroad as a fireman. And in 1943, he was killed in an accident at the switchyards in Union Pacific there in Las Vegas. And so she, with her 3 children, moved back as a widow to Mesquite. She used her a little tiny bit of insurance, life insurance that the Union Pacific gave her, to purchase some land here in Mesquite and built the Coronet Court, which was the first modern type motel with inside plumbing and all of that in Mesquite. There were other cabins and things that this one actually had inside plumbing a little bit. As time went on, she met a man from Delta, Utah via Burbank, California, where there's a policeman and different things, named Philip Abbott, who was a great-grandson of Myron Abbott, but ended up in Delta. And together, he was a widower with 4 children. She was a widow with 3 children. They got together and they remodeled the motel into what is still today the Desert Palms Motel, down here by the Mesquite Furniture and Ace Hardware. And they owned that whole half a block clear down to the other street. And then they made that into a very modern motel, built the first swimming pool in Mesquite. Now, I don't mean the first swimming pool, because there's swimming holes all up and down Mesquite Boulevard, but I mean a real swimming pool with plaster and everything, no diving board, chlorinated water and all that whole bit. And then a lot of other motels in Mesquite started following her. The last motel to come along doing that was the Western Village Motel, which today is the Oasis. So they had hers, his, and ours family. 2 children born after they moved here to themselves. The youngest child, being a Down syndrome child, they ended up moving to Vegas to where they could get better support base to help her. And Phil went into as an agent for New York Life Insurance, and Thelma was very involved in dealing with community affairs, especially among the Down syndrome. I can't think of that village they call it down there. Opportunity Village, yes. Mabel Mitchell was born in 1916, in November 20th, 1916 in Beaver Dam, Arizona. She too was delivered by her grandmother in their home. She was a very smart little girl, apparently, because once she got to school, she got promoted very quickly. And long before most kids get senior age, she was taking over dirt roads to Flagstaff, Arizona to go to school, college. At college, she met Andrew J. Mitchell, who lived in Flagstaff, and they got together, got married. Then the war started. Andrew went off to the Pacific, was in the Marines, and was involved in Guam, Saipan, and Tainay. And Mabel continued in school. When he come back, I think she was at the Beaver Dam. He come there to find her, or to get up with her again. She was teaching at Littlefield School, grades K1 through 8, and he finished his schooling. Then she moved down and was a teacher at Mesquite Elementary, and then Andrew got his education finished, and he ended up being the principal of Virgin Valley High School in Bunkerville. and she was this English teacher in Bunkerville High School. Heard about it. After a few years, they moved to Boulder City, where he became the principal of Boulder City Elementary, which now is named the Andrew J. Mitchell Elementary, and she became a high school English teacher. Very active in Boulder City High School, and very active in the community, and especially in the profession. Andrew was, let's see, he was involved in the Nevada Education Association, the Clark County Education Association, and the National School Administrators Association, where he served as the National Vice President of that association and even National President of the Administrators Association for a number of years. Mabel was involved, she was President of the Nevada Education Association, President of the Nevada Teachers Association, and President of the National Teachers' Rights and Responsibilities Commission. And she is a published author. They have 4 daughters. Betty McKnight Houston was born in St. George, and she married Florian D. Houston of Mesquite. Florian's parents were Dee and Nell Houston. Dee was a farmer, and then they became businessmen. And they opened up and ran for a number of years the Denell Motel, which today is known as the Statelight Casino Motel. They didn't have a casino, they had a motel. They're taking part of the motel down to the casino. Betty, Florian and Betty, when they got married, moved to Vegas, where Betty worked in the restaurant business, and Florian was a successful businessman in the gasoline retail business and real estate. They have had 5 children, 4 of whom are little. So we have people here who have gone from this little place, made a mark in the world, and come back to enjoy, and they're going to remember with us what it was like as they grew up. So, describe for us your home and farm. What was it like, Betty? You're the youngest.
That's
Your memory's the best.
But I remember the least because it didn't seem like I lived at home much. My parents, because I was so late and everybody had gone at the time of the war, and I was alone. I did help Dad a little on the farm, but mostly I was shipped here and there to take care of kids. I went to Mabel's while Andrew was in the military, and she was so little and she was so round and plump, I had to lift her legs up on the bed when she was pregnant so that she could lay down. And then after that, then they shipped me over to Jenny's, and I took care of her child, and then I lived with Thelma, and I just kind of went from hither to yon. Nobody really wanted me, so I just got shut around. But I do remember a little about the house, and my mother we had 4 rooms, and it was, and then a big porch where the boys would sleep at night. I enjoyed it, but I sure was glad to get off the beaver dams. And I used to tell Mabel when she'd ask me to come back, I'd say, no, if you're going to bury me, throw dirt in my face, but don't ever ask me to come back to beaver dams. But I changed my mind.
Thelma, where was it located, the farm, the home, where was it located? How big was it?
Down next to the Beaver Dam Creek, it was located. And it was in a tent, a boarded up tent, partway with boards, and the rest was canvas awning, canvas roof. And we lived there till Dad got the rock house built up right under the hill, where we spent the rest of our lives in that rock house.
That hill you're talking about is just about right underneath the water tank towards the creek.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. And then the farm, what did you ask, by the way?
How big was the farm?
Oh, it was, considering farms the way they are, it was very small. It was more like we raised everything though. We raised everything. There wasn't any vegetables that we didn't try to raise. We had grapes, fruit trees, nut trees, both almond, walnut, and no, we didn't have pecans. I don't think we had pecans. Walnut and almonds we had, but we raised everything we ate, we raised. There wasn't anything, and we just canned enough in the summer to do us in the winter. What we ate in the winter, we couldn't go to the store and buy, so we canned it. bottled it in bottles. And that's,
Were there any stores in Beaver Dam?
no stores, there was nothing. If we had to buy something that came from the store, Dad got on in the team with the team and wagon, and we went to Mesquite, and there was one store in Mesquite, and that's where we buy our staples
That you had?
that we had to buy. Everything else we raised. We raised everything. We ate. Our clothing came from Montgomery and Sears catalogs. Everything was ordered through the mail.
Did you make all?
Mom made, and we hated that because Mom was not a seamstress. We weren't very proud of the things she'd make for us, but we had to wear them because it was all we had. So we wore them anyway. But she did the best she could, and so we had to appreciate that.
Mabel, what do you remember about the farm?
Well, I remember some things
Right up close.
that obviously my sister still remembers.
It's not on. Yours isn't either.
Yeah, we have something wrong here with our microphones.
Oh, there's
Mine's on, but yours isn't, so you're gonna have to talk loud.
Oh, all right. I remember some things that Thelma doesn't remember, I guess. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because we had peanuts. I remember
Oh yes, we did, raise
we had
peanuts.
great
Peanuts.
little fields, little plots of peanuts. And besides that, we had everything that you could even possibly dream of in the store. We had almonds and walnuts, and Thelma doesn't remember. She corrected me when I said we had pecans, but we still have pecans. My husband and I live on what's left of the farm that my father owned, my father and grandfather, and we have beautiful pecans. Come by and I'll give you some.
What, so describe, during your days, how many people, how many families lived at the Beaver Dam?
2.
4.
No,
Uncle Sam, Uncle Sam River, Uncle Sam Leavitt, Wright McKnight, and Clark McKnight.
yeah, there was 4.
That's all there was in Beaver Dam.
That's all there was.
How about Littlefield?
Joe Kramer,
7.
Joe River,
7. When I was
Robert River,
Robert, Louis River,
and Harold
Harold,
River,
and Joe River,
and the Prunties.
and the Prunties,
The Prunties.
and Framers. Framers. There was,
Okay, so describe for us what up the wash means. Up the wash. Where was up the wash?
oh, the Beaver Dam wash?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing but sand and gravel, and the water seeped up at the beginning of the wash. Water seeped up from springs deep underneath, the best water in the world.
Is
Clear.
there any families living up the wash? that you
Yes, there
remember?
was 2 Leavitt families, Ernest Leavitt and Sam Leavitt, lived at the wash. And when
Wallace Iverson.
the Wallace Iverson lived across the river from Littlefield.
He ended up going up the wash.
Yeah, but he may have started at the wash from Beaver Dam. Then he moved over to Littlefield.
For those of you up the wash today would be called Mormon Wells, up in those cottonwood areas up there. So there wasn't very many people living up in the Beaver Dam, Littlefield area as you guys were growing up. Were there any Indians living around that area that you can remember? Indians would come in and through, but did they live up there?
They passed through all the time. We'd buy peanuts and
You mean pine nuts?
or pine nuts, I mean, from them, and they would come and beg for hay from Dad for their horses, and milk. They would get milk from Mom, but we had all around our farm was in where the Indians used to live, and there was on the point of the hill there was a a big rock that was, I don't know how they ever hollowed it out, like a bowl. It was just like a big bowl. And that's where they ground their corn and their wheat or anything they wanted ground. They would grind it in that bowl. And it may still be there for all I know. I've got one, a small one in my home in Las Vegas that I found in another place up there.
You may not want to say that very loud. You may not want to say that very loud. Tell me, you came to Mesquite in a horse and buggy.
Yes.
You and Mabel did.
Yes.
Betty,
I came in a
car
car.
by the time
Yes.
you come along.
Dad had the
What was
first
the road
one.
like? Where did the road go when you went down?
Nowhere near where it is now. It just meandered along those hills and the washes. It had to be very crooked and look for places where there was no place of water could wash away, because the washes, you couldn't get through those with a car or wagon either.
Do you remember, Mabel, of any of the direction of the road?
Well,
Any scary parts on the road?
anyone who is going up that way, if you look right after, well, you wouldn't know where Big Bend was, but there was a big bend in the road, and then there is a part of the old road, I promise you. I remember it so well, I would just be terrified when we would go down that hill.
It was actually a dugway that was
It was.
raised up by boards.
Yes.
Basically, the old highway going to Littlefield follows that, except they didn't have a bridge over Sand Hollow, and they didn't go down to the foot of the hills like the highway does now between the bridge and the first big bend that they're talking about. They kind of went over the top of the hills and then down into the wash and back up on top. It was not a very nice road. So you're young, you're growing up, and it's time for you to go to school. What did you do?
Walked. We walked to school
Where?
in Littlefield. Littlefield is our school. We walked to school. And if it was raining or if the floods came down the Beaver Dam Wash so that we couldn't get across, Dad would put us in the wagon, and he would, I've seen him swim his team across the wagon, across the wash in a flood that was deep enough that the water came up to the bed of the wagon. But the horses, he would get them across and take us to school, because he was bound we were going to school, whether or not, no matter what.
What was school like when you got over there, Mabel, over into that little school building?
Oh, I'll never
I
forget.
mean, it was all only one room, wasn't it? With all
One
kinds
room.
of 1 through 8th grade.
But I'll never forget Daddy Bridges. He used to hit the desk and he'd say, "Boys and girls, knowledge is power." And I believed him. It was wonderful.
And after Betty, you went to the school too, didn't you?
I did, and I do remember the Beaver Dam School when they had all the kids in. The most vivid memory I have of the Beaver Dam School is the day after, Monday, the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And we were just, this was the biggest thing in the world that all of us, and we stood out in that court, or the schoolyard, and discussed that. We didn't really think much about school, but that, I definitely remember that day very vividly.
Betty found an old picture that she's blown up here, and she said, "I don't know anybody that's on there." And I got looking at it, and I said, "Well, Betty, that looks like you." And she said, "Well, for heaven's sakes, that is me." And then she got looking around, and there's Emmeline and Eveline, and there's Gladys, and pretty quick, I think they're getting pretty well all named. But I noticed that the school is not the cement school that's there now, it's a rock school. Now, whether they just cemented over that or not, I'm not sure, because I know they had 2 different schools at 2 different times. In school, did you have school dances and things like that, or was it just young and you didn't do that?
No dances, not when I was there.
Okay.
We had no dances.
But you didn't have, there was no church in Littlefield Beaver Dam,
Oh, yes.
so you held church in the school.
Yes.
So everybody, it was kind of the center of everything going on.
It was the center. It's where we held everything.
What did you do for church? I mean,
We had potluck dinners, and sometimes the older people would get up and dance.
at church?
No, at the dances.
Oh.
At the potluck dinners.
Okay, but they didn't go like the church does today, go on a block and you go at 9 o'clock and get out at 12.
No.
They would go for an hour. So would you go back all the way to Beaver Dam, or would you stay there, or when dinner time, just take your meal with you?
We had one meeting, and Relief Society was on a different day. And
Well, we
the
did go
church-
in the morning.
Church, yes, in the morning. It
We'd
was
go
in
to
the
Sunday
morning.
school and go back for sacrament later. And then,
Not when I was there.
and the Relief Society and that were held different days.
Yes. But that was later.
So
Yeah.
did you have primary? Can you remember primary when you were young?
No,
No primary.
We had
Did you,
no
Betty,
primary.
did you have primary?
Yes, we did. We had
Yeah.
primary.
By the time you come along,
Yeah,
primary.
there was
Do you
primary.
remember primary at all, Mabel?
No, but I remember, and I think there's some relatives of this brother. We used to have our Sunday school at Joe Rever's home. That home is still standing today, and what a wonderful man. He taught us the gospel. It was just unreal. He was so beautifully qualified, and he lived the gospel, so, and we knew he lived it because we lived there.
What, you mentioned floods. How often would a flood, was floods more dangerous to you and your farm coming down the wash? Or was they more dangerous coming down the river? Or was they just about the same? Or
Wash, down the Beaver Dam wash.
was the most dangerous for you?
Yes.
So how often would it flood back in those days?
At least once a year, didn't it?
about once a year, we'd have heavy storms up above the wash.
A lot of thunderstorms and there would always be a flood down the creek.
And it would be from bank to bank.
And I would remember Dad would go out, I was always scared to death that he would not come back because boy, you know, it would just be raging and you could hear it. And he'd don his big hip boots, you know, those great big leather boots and come to his hips and take his shovel and away he'd go to try to save the,
With his team, he'd take his team to haul with a rope to tow cars across the Beaver Dam Creek when it got low enough that he could do that.
When the cars were there?
When the cars came back, yeah.
Okay, there's a part of Beaver Dam Littlefield that I got in on just the end of. I got in on, I remember. But Rob Rever, I believe it was,
Yes.
started truck garden and shipping out radishes, onions, things this way, and then it spread to everywhere. Can you tell how that happened and why, and kind of something about it?
let's ask Noma, she's here,
Mabel, what can you remember about it?
Well, I do remember that Rob Rever started it, and he would haul things to Kingman, Arizona even. And he sort of infected the rest of us with making a little money. So we all, at least my uncle, family, and we, Clark McKnight, started growing things to sell. And we sold everything from watercress. We'd go down to the creek and pull the watercress and bunch it. And the big trucks, and it sounds like, oh, that couldn't have been true in those days, but it was true. Big trucks would come and pick up watermelons, cantaloupe, apricots, peaches, plums, watercress,
Tomatoes.
right, everything.
So everyone, when he started that, it just kind of turned into a kind of a community.
They had a committee. It was a,
What did each one just do their own, or did they form an association?
no, they didn't form an association, but they just grew the things that were needed most.
Did they have a central place that they would take them and pack them?
Yes, they had a place. In
In
Littlefield.
In Littlefield, and that's still there. It's the first
Yes.
one on the right going
Yes,
down.
yes.
That used to be just tin packing shit.
That's right.
Okay. Can you remember the first car coming through Beaver Dam? Mabel, or Thelma, can you remember the very first car you remember seeing? Tell us about it.
Yes. We all just stood out there and watched it.
Where did it come from? I mean, was it coming
It was
down the hill or down the
no,
river?
it was coming up from down south. It was going north.
From Mesquite.
Mhm.
And it's just a dirt road, a trail?
Just a dirt road, went right by our house.
Did they stop and talk to you or anything, or just look at you?
Oh, they stopped everywhere there was water. The cars stopped every place there was water.
How many cars a day do you think, or a month, do you think you'd see
Oh, my
drive
goodness.
first?
Maybe 1 or 2 or 3.
A month?
Uh,
Mabel, you're younger, so as you come along, how many cars do you remember seeing a month when you got a teenager?
Not many more than that, but I do remember the gypsies.
Yes.
The gypsies would come and they provided the most wonderful entertainment. Dance and sing like you wouldn't believe. And we would sneak out of the house. I see some family members down there looking at me like I'm telling stories, and I'm telling stories. But, you know, it was wonderful. We just dance along the ditch banks in the sand as they would dance. Oh, they were gorgeous.
Well, people were kind of afraid of gypsies. Why?
Well, they stole our chickens. And my father didn't approve really of our entertaining ourselves at his expense, but we did it anyway.
Do you remember the gypsies, Thelma?
Yes, we stayed clear of them. We were told not to go close to the
So
gypsies.
you were obedient, Mabel wasn't?
I don't know how close she got, but Dad forbid us to go.
Well, Mabel, can you tell us how you got gypsy jewelry if you didn't?
Well, we didn't really, see, there was a ditch bank and they were down here by the creek. And we just walk along the ditch bank and dance a little as they played their music. Oh, they were wonderful.
But you would trade things?
Oh, no, no.
Would you rob your mom's eggs to trade for a ring? Or?
No, I never did do that. I didn't go that far.
When you're living in Beaver Dam, there's 4 families, 7 over in Littlefield, a couple up the wash. It's 13, 15 miles of hard wagon road to Mesquite. It's 30 hard wagon roads to St. George. Somebody falls down and breaks their arm, what did you do?
My grandmother was a midwife. She took care of everything until she passed away. She took care of the medical needs of the people in that area. After that, they rushed them to St. George if it was serious. And that's where they...
As the roads got better.
That was the road.
And cars come along. But in your early days...
In the early days, I remember my cousin, Uncle Wright's boy, was shot in an accident. The boys went out hunting and they went under a mulberry tree and the limb pulled the trigger and hit him, and he was killed. But until he passed away, they laid him on grandmother's table. And Dad went to St. George. Dr. McGregor was the only doctor in St. George at the time. And he got Dr. McGregor and brought him down to the Beaver Dams to take care of Sheldon. And he did, but he didn't make it. But he operated on him on Grandma's table.
What about Mabel? You were telling a story that's quite a poignant story about a medical emergency in the case of one of Wright's boys' wives having a baby. Would you repeat that, please?
I was pretty young, but I remember that outside of my grandfather's home, maybe 10, 15 feet, there was some kind of frame set up, and on the frame was a wooden coffin with my cousin's wife, big with child. I remember looking at her and thinking, what what in the world is wrong with her? Because it seems so strange. But she, of course, died on that table, on that frame where she was. And other than the one that Thelma just repeated about when my brother shot and killed, not meaning to, his cousin, that was about the saddest time that I remember in all our days.
Apparently this baby couldn't come. They couldn't do anything to help her. They just sat around the table and prayed until she died. So medical facilities were pretty sparse and survival was pretty hard. What did you do with dead people? How did you prepare them? You know, someone died, what happened? Can you remember anything about it?
Yes. They kept them in their home, in one room, and somebody, neighbors or somebody in the family would sit up with the dead all night and keep, so that the flies and bugs and everything away from the body, and keep it clean. And they would be there, but they didn't leave very long laying around. They did bury them fast because the bodies they didn't keep, especially in the summer.
So there were times when funerals were held where even family members down here would barely get the word.
That's right.
You remember anything like that, Betty, or was you so, the times were a little better?
Times were better.
Aren't you lucky?
I was so lucky. I was lucky.
Tell me one more thing then. You said you grew everything there, and you had all this food, you bottled it and everything. How did you keep milk? And how do you keep meat and all that kind of stuff?
We had a cellar, and there was a spring. There was a spring of water right down in the cellar. And my mother had a separator where we separated the milk that Dad and the boys would bring in. And we had a cooler. It was made out of boxes stacked on each other and gunny sacks spread over them. And on top, my father fixed, because of this little spring down in the creek, a water line. I don't know how in the world he did it, but there was a water line going up on top of that, those boxes where we kept the food, and it dripped, dripped, dripped all the time, and kept that gunny sack, those gunny sacks, wet, and so and because it was down in the cellar, besides, it kept it good, free from spoiling.
Betty, what they do when you were growing up? They still have that?
Yes,
They have a
yes.
fridge? Still
No,
have
in the beginning, we did still have that. And I know the cream would be separated, but it's a wonder we didn't get sick, you know, because it was still awful hot, but that's what we did have when I was the first I remember.
May be of interest then that we have at our home the separator that came out of that
hand
cellar.
crank separated. How about that? What about, what can you tell us about Virgin River bloat? Were you blessed with that up there?
No, we didn't have Virgin.
No, we had the best water in the world on the Beaver Dams.
That's the one thing I do remember as a kid. My dad would say, before we go to Mesquite Bay, you have to get a drink or you have to take your own water. You're not allowed to drink that virgin bloat down there. And so we either took a bottle of water with us or we drank before we left and waited till we got home to drink again.
Took a canteen along with us.
He didn't think we should drink the
Did
virgin
you ever
bloat.
take a barrel of water to give to people
Oh,
down
yeah.
here?
They hauled a lot of water from the Beaver Dams. They would come up with their wagons and barrels and get water.
Thelma, when you were at home, before you got married, did you ever have electricity?
Oh, no.
Mabel, did you?
Well, we had a coal plant, so we made our own electricity.
Later on? Did you remember electricity? You had electricity when you were there?
no, I remember the Kohler plant, but it did come, the electricity did come.
While you were still
But you
home.
know, they was still sending me off, Vinnie, so I didn't really stay there too much. I was still being shipped hither and yon, so I came to the city and had electricity.
You had all that kind of stuff.
I did.
So where did you go to high school, the three of you?
Virgin Valley.
Even Bunkerville.
And you graduated, how old were you when you graduated, Mabel?
Probably not quite 16.
Okay. And how old were you, Thelma? Did you graduate?
Now, don't ask me that. I didn't graduate, I got married.
That's
The year before I was to graduate, I got married.
Okay. And Betty, did you
I
graduate?
graduated from Virgin Valley High School.
Did you go on to college or anything, have you?
I did the School of Hard Knocks, and it was a wonderful
That was
education.
my school. That was my school, the School of Hard Knocks. I
And
learned a lot.
Mabel is the only one in your family that's gone off to
The
college?
college.
Yes.
She twisted Dad's arm and she let me down.
She's probably a little favorite. So how did you get to high school? I mean, that's too far to go by wagon back and forth. What did you do?
Dad had so many fruit trees and garden stuff, and he would pay families in Mesquite to board us. And we would live in Mesquite and then ride the bus to Bunkerville, to high school.
Back in about 1931, Beaver Dam Lodge was built. Can you tell what that did to Beaver Dam and what went on there? What was so important about Beaver Dam Lodge? Do you remember it at all, Betty?
I really don't. I mean, I remember it being there, but I don't really remember. I was born in 30, and so
Oh, yeah.
I
But
really
it
don't.
was there, but not during the
It was
building.
there when I,
Can you remember activities going on at the lodge?
I remember some of the people who lived there because I would be friends with them. I remember Dick Hammer from St. George that had the Hammer Cafe up there for many years. He was a cook and a chef there at the Beaver Dam Lodge, and we were good friends. You know, my dad was friends with him. And I remember a few little incidences like that, but I never went there for dances or for anything like that.
What about you, Mabel? Can you remember the Beaver Dam Lodge and activities there?
Yes, I do remember very well.
Why did they build it?
Well, the New York Kodak Company sent their representatives, I guess, out, and they had bought from my uncle, Uncle Wright McKnight, his side of the Beaver Dam Creek area. And we were on the opposite side. And it became a very well-known movie star, great people whose names were in the highlights all the time, who came there. And I worked there when I was, I don't know, maybe I was 16. I worked there and found the people to be wonderful. But then I went away and we came back, and my husband and I were running my dad's service station after Andrew came home from the war. And the people from the lodge just came in droves over to our station to get away from what they considered prison almost, because they were working so hard, and there were lots of people coming by that time through the
Tourists coming driving through.
right. And
Hey, Thelma, do you remember the lodge activities or any
Yes.
connection with you?
That's about it. Yes, it was quite a busy place.
Okay, at that time, by the time the 40s come through and the Beaver Dam Lodge is going big, the 30s, the highway is asphalted and it comes right around the corner, right in front of the lodge, not away like it is now. It come right in front of the lodge and it went across the bridge over it was a 2-lane highway, very narrow, creosote wood bridge with wire railing. And you get over on the other side, and right there is your dad's station. Now, why in the world, with your dad being able to sell crops and things on the truck gardens and things this way, why did he go into a station, a gasoline station? What started that?
you want to know?
Yeah.
He was tired. He was getting old, and he was tired of farming. And he had gone into the crop business that we talked about before, where he was selling every kind of edible thing. He just wanted to get out of it, and he thought he could just sit in the service station and let people come, and he'd put gas in their cars or let them do it, and he'd make a living, and that would be that.
Was he successful? Was it a good living?
Yes, yes, very good.
Yes,
Yeah, good living. But he still had gardens and all that stuff.
yes, and he sold pop and candy and knickknacks to the
Water,
water,
He
water
also-
bags,
water to the
Maybe they
tourists.
also made cactus candy.
cactus.
They
Yeah.
took the barrel cactuses out of the desert and made cactus candy. It left a little bit to be desired. It wasn't as good as a Babe Ruth, but it was, you know, it was candy, it was sweet.
Who's Beaver Dam Bill? Some people say Beaver Dam Bill started Beaver Dam. Is that right, anybody?
No, I don't think so.
No.
No.
Who's Beaver Dam Bill?
He came in after the war.
Well, and he was just a traveler. He was just a tourist that came in.
He used to own Jack's Bar on the corner.
Yeah.
That's where he started.
He started and stopped. Didn't they?
Named Bill Walters,
Bill Wolf.
and he got the name Beaver Dam Bill because he bought your father's station and business.
Yeah.
And then eventually moved it over just across from where the, I guess it's the fire station there in Littlefield, there's Beaver Dam. And then ended up, that's also where the truck stop was for Arizona weights and measures and so forth. World War I. Can you remember World War I and what it was like for you, Thelma? Where were you when World War I got going and ended? Do you remember
I
any of
was in
that?
Las Vegas.
World War I.
Yes.
One.
Oh, World War I, no, I don't remember. I do remember hearing Dad and Mom discussing it one day on the farm, but that's all I remember.
World War II,
World War II was, yes.
and you was in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And
The World War I, we weren't, not any of our family participated. I had an uncle that was in it, Uncle Lehman.
and World War I. But
Uh-huh.
in World War II, you had three brothers.
Yes, I had 3 brothers in that,
We had 4 brothers.
4 brothers in it.
But poor Carl, the oldest one, was not physically fit to serve, so he was assigned as a CB. He worked for the civil service in building airports and things in the islands. And Dick, one of our brothers, met him during the war there.
That's right.
I counted eight men from Beaver Dam Littlefield out of how many? 4, 7, couple of families, 9, 8 men serving in World War II.
Yes.
Mabel, Armistice Day, or the end of World War II, the celebration, do you remember what happened? Where were you when that happened?
Just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Clapping my hands because my husband would be coming home.
Okay, I've thrown this in just because I want to know, and I've never really known the story. Some of you probably won't even know what I'm talking about, but what can you tell us about the old soldier's grave in Beaver Dam?
Florian and I watched it be dug up just recently. I remember as a kid seeing always that fence around it and that grave and wondering. I didn't know anything about it actually until Bill Evans and Gary Hayes. He took his backhoe and he dug that grave up, and they let the community come and view it. And I remember it was amazing that it was still as much intact as it was. That it was made out of pine boards and they were still pretty much intact. They did slip aside and we could see the man's body. There wasn't much left of the clothing. We could see the bones. His leather boots were still pretty much. He had a belt with a buckle that was still.
Who was he?
Well, he was a traveler going through, and I think Clifford Peterson, well, yeah, it was, but I think Clifford was the one that told us something of the story.
Clifford was a constable.
Yes, and I don't really remember the whole thing. that they
Basically,
told.
they think he just walked off the bus there.
And killed
So-
himself.
so-
He killed himself. They said he was out of the service. and
So the community
depressed.
buried him, and then finally family found him, put a headstone up, and he stayed there until they built the new school, and it was close to that, so they moved him up on the hill. Do you remember Abe Test? Where were you, Thelma, were you here in Mesquite during the Abe testing?
Yes.
What was it like?
We-
What happened?
Oh, it was bad. We would take kids to Las Vegas for church activities and dances and things, and they stopped my car once. I had 6 girls in my car headed for Las Vegas, and they stopped my car when we told us to go into the service station and get it tested. They run it through 3 times and through the water before it would pass the test to let it go. It had that much contamination.
Can you remember anything here in the valley as far as, what was it like, I mean, during the Abe test?
It was like, everybody was out watching, and they generally was notified, ahead sometimes that when the test would be, and everybody was watching.
So what happened?
Well, there was a lot of contamination that they would never admit, but there was a lot of deaths through the valley that they claimed was from that.
Mabel, you wrote a book called Gloria that tells about, can you tell us a little bit about that on the Abe testing here in the valley?
Well, of
Some of the
course,
results?
the movie people and especially the government denied that it had anything to do with her death. But there were half a dozen medical people who said that what she died of eventually resulted from contamination from the fallout. And my husband has pictures of that fallout, of the bomb going off, and it was a sad kind of thing.
It was kind of exciting too, though, wasn't it? To go up and watch the explosion. I remember you'd know just about what time it would go off. So our parents would wake us up, take us up in the hills where we could get out of town away from the lights. Sometimes I can remember twice just watching it from my bed. The whole earth
Yes.
would light up just as if it was noonday for about a second and a half. It almost, you'd think you'd go blind, but it wouldn't. I can remember looking out and seeing the trees, but the colors weren't quite as wild as they are in the daytime, but it was just bright, and then it'd go dark. Then it'd usually take us, if they hadn't taken us, they'd wake us up, take our kids up, go up on the hill, and we'd wait, and you'd hear about how many minutes, Thelma?
Oh, I don't remember the minutes, but it would be a little while before.
Usually around 17 to 20 minutes,
Yeah.
depending on where the test site they did it.
But
You'd
see,
hear it coming up the river, and it'd just rumble, 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 and then the whole earth would shake under you as it moved
Yeah.
on.
as we lived in Las Vegas at the time, we had to set and make sure our doors were open, front and back, because we'd have these big plate glass windows, and you could sit there and watch that plate glass window just move back and
Yeah.
forth. So the doors had to be open so that they wouldn't burst. But it took 7 minutes. We knew from the time
In Las
in Las Vegas, it took 7 minutes from the time we'd see the flume and the big flash before the rumble would hit.
I know that there was at least one test, I used to remember the name, but it broke nearly every window in the school. It cracked Thomas W. Leavitt's big house, that big pioneer house in Buckville. If you look on the north side between the 2 windows up top, you can still see the crack that was caused by the atomic bomb blast there, which is where Gloria lived, by the way. I remember that by the time we would leave Bunkerville to come over to Mesquite Elementary School, you could see the mushroom cloud coming up over the mesa. By the time we come out for recess, the mushroom cloud would be drifted up and the cloud would be all over us. I can remember playing on the playground up here at this school during morning recess when the dust from that fallout was so thick that you couldn't see from one side of the lawn to the other side. And we were just out playing in recess, no one messed with our recess, you know. So, nobody ever told us any different. I don't know if we'll ever know the whole damage that that thing caused health-wise. And I'm wondering if it hasn't even changed some genes in some of our families to where we may not see it, the end of it even yet. I don't know. But it was a very scary thing. My father worked on the highway department and had to carry the badge, and he to his day he died, he had big burns on his back that was just like lye burns all over his back, which it was, his fallout. And he ended up getting some cancer from it, a little bit. Different people in town, Dewey Hart, come back from a test and lost every bit of hair on his head. He was as shiny bald as a cue ball. So it had a lot of effect here. When you were a teenager, what did Bunkerville and Mesquite look like when you come down here? Describe the town as you entered it. What businesses were here? What homes?
The first one was Rodney Colton's service station, because my dad said that most people live to eat, but I eat to live, or I mean, most people eat to live, and I live to eat, and we never could pass Rodney's without stopping for it.
Where was that? Where was that?
That was right up at the end of town, and as you came down Lynch Hill, or you know, you made a turn right there, and there was a ditch that went along, and went over the ditch, and then Rodney Colton's station was on.
Just about where that Arby's place and thing is today.
Yeah.
About in that area. Yeah. There was 3 big turns in Mesquite in those days. 3 big corners. There was the turn that turned in there, and then there was the corner up here, and then when you got down to where the road goes to Riverside Road, there was called the Freighter turn, a big long turn, a couple of blocks long as I remember. It's not that long, but it was huge. Went from where they're building those new houses there, down by that C-Mart, started there and turned and ended up almost where that U-Haul place is, rental place. So as you come around these turns and you got into, what was here? I mean, Mesquite probably had at that time 300-400 people living in it.
Vonda's Cafe, Faye's Cafe,
Hughes store.
yeah.
Hughes and Fraser
I
store.
worked for 25 cents an hour at Jimmy Hughes, father of the current grandfather, right. Wonderful man, but he had a little store down there.
Anything else about the homes? I mean, what was the community a nice looking community, or was it ratty?
Well, we probably thought it was nice because it was Beaver Dam.
Well, more people.
Yeah, more people, and so I probably thought it was pretty nice.
In my youth, which is a lot since yours, but I remember irrigation ditches going down the sides of the street, trees lining the street. Everybody irrigated their lawns and things this way, and the houses were kept up. You didn't see a lot of junk or ratty places.
No.
In Bunkerville, I know it was tree-lined streets with irrigation ditches, little town ditches going down both sides. It was just a lot of fun.
No
A lot
street
nicer.
lights.
No asphalt on the roads. And in Mesquite, I don't think there was either, except Main Street. But do you remember when they put asphalt in?
I don't.
Well, let me think here a minute. Last question that right now that I'm thinking to ask. As young people growing up in the Virgin Valley, in fact in the most remote and untouched portion of the Virgin Valley, what is your reaction today to the changes you see in the Beaver Dam Littlefield area, in the Mesquite Bunkerville area? I mean, you see that every day and it becomes common. Now, Thelma come into town after dark tonight and didn't even know where she was. And
Nothing was familiar.
what's your reaction to it, Mabel?
Well, I guess I love Mesquite and I love Bunkerville because I lived in both of them. And I I don't mind the growth. Everybody's gotta live somewhere.
Agreed.
So
But did you ever think that it would do that? When you were young, did you ever think you would see something like this?
heavens no.
Vinnie, we thought when the freeway passed Mesquite and went outside and didn't come down the main road, that it would literally die. We thought that was the end of Mesquite, that there would never be anything more. How wrong we are.
Thelma, do you remember across the street from your motel, before the bank was there, a vacant lot between France Hughes and the wash? Did you remember that sign that William Harper put up there?
We've made so much fun of him, I don't remember, he did so many.
William Harper was actually quite, when it comes to being the first, what was it called, Chamber of Commerce? He wasn't Chamber of Commerce, but let me tell you, William Harper had a belief in what Mesquite would become. Everybody made fun of him.
He put signs up, made a street, and
He
put a
named
sign
the
on it.
streets and put, I remember, in fact, you can still see it up here on the cement wall of the old school, First North, or North First Street, or something like that. They had a big sign that he painted himself. It's a huge sign. I bet that thing was 8 feet tall by probably 16 feet. And all I remember is it said, it covered the whole thing, but it started out with Mesquite, Nevada, growing by leaps and bounds. And this is way back in probably, what was it, 1955? And there was probably at the time 500 people here. His dream was, and he didn't prophesy, but he said, someday we're going to get the railroad right here to Mesquite. He believed it. And who knows anymore? I don't dare say no to anything anymore. Do any of you have questions you'd like to ask these three ladies? Yes, Shirley.
First of all, was Clark Gable one of the movie stars that hung out at Beaver Dam Lodge?
Yes, he did.
Clark Gable, did he hang his name?
Yes,
He did.
yes.
And who were some of the others?
Carol Lombard.
Yes,
Mhm.
my brother went on a trip when one of them was killed with a horseback. He was affiliated with the Las Vegas,
But that was in Las Vegas.
that was in Las Vegas. Oh, yes, that was in Las Vegas. Well, it was out of it wasn't in Las Vegas. It was out of Las Vegas, but they went on horseback to get the body.
So it was just a sort of a nice escape that they discovered when they were doing all those Western movies for those folks in Hollywood. How did Beaver Dam get its name?
How did Beaver Dam get its name?
From the beavers, on the beaver dams, there was the stream was loaded with beavers, and they would build their own dams on the Beaver Dam Creek, and that's where it got its name.
And are they still hanging out there today?
No, you never see a beaver there anymore.
What happened?
Oh, they disappeared. I never did see them in my day. My dad saw them, but I never did see them in my day.
My husband and I saw them.
There's still a few around.
Well, I don't think there
In
are
fact,
now.
there was a
I don't
beaver
know.
dam I saw just before this last flood,
Right.
right down where the creek goes into the river. They have a big dam across there.
And there was a spring there. Is that where a lot of the water came from to the wash, or what? Tell me a little more
There
about the
wasn't
Beaver
really
Spring.
springs in Beaver Dam that brought water in. It was way up
Up the
in
river,
shorter,
up the-
up above in the mountains, way up there, about
There's an
20 miles.
underground river there.
It just sprung
But
up.
there were springs across the river. Can you
Yeah.
remember anybody using those
Yes.
bitter springs?
Yeah, petrified spring.
Did anybody use them for anything?
The rivers did.
What did they use them for? Irrigation?
Well, they couldn't, not from where we were thinking about, it had no way of getting it over there, but there were springs all down the Beaver Dam Creek, all the way.
Oh, yeah.
And they got permission to put a ditch running from one of those springs around the hill and over to Littlefield. And people thought they were crazy, but it worked.
So okay, that's another thing. The Littlefield flume. What was that?
It was something like what I'm talking about. They had,
Did the main road to Littlefield, did it go over the hill, or did they have a road that went around that
No,
point?
went over the hill.
But they did have a flume that was hanging off the cliff about, and in order to get water from the creek over to Littlefield, to take it out, and then to keep the level up high enough to flow in Littlefield, they had to be about 14 feet off the ground, and they just built a wooden trough all around that cliff where the bridge is, and then into a ditch, and then down into Littlefield. I was talking to Melvin Peterson tonight, and he said that after this last flood, they went looking up through there, and you can see now that where the old timers actually went across the river to those petrified springs and took out petrified blocks
Yeah.
to brace up to make that's showing right now.
So these springs were some of the, contributed to the fact that you could grow so many wonderful things in Beaver Dam.
With the springs, yeah, just that fresh water.
The water is excellent water.
Anyone else have any questions? Yes.
Oh, could you describe telephone and telegraph service?
Telephone and telegraph service.
Finally had a telephone.
One telephone in the whole,
We had a
Unity.
telephone.
no telegraphs.
Oh, no. One telephone, and it was on the wall right in the kitchen or in the living room, where everybody could get to it that wanted to.
In your house?
In my dad's house.
So everyone in Beaver Dam, Littlefield that wanted to use the phone, or if they called for somebody,
Well, I don't
Then
know
come
if
to your house.
Littlefield had any or not, but we had.
Noma?
Yeah, I think Joe Reber had one.
You had one later in your house too. I remember there, at one time, there was one phone in Littlefield, one phone in Mesquite, and one phone in Bunkerville. And when you called for somebody, you'd call and they'd run and get them, and then you'd call back. And Dudley Leavitt in Bunkerville talked to his wife in Littlefield when they first got the phone there, and it was proclaimed a great and marvelous world we live in, that you can sit in Bunkerville and talk to your wife clear up to Littlefield. There is no end to what the Lord can do. Any other questions? Oh, there is one thing you mentioned, telegraph. One thing, apparently up the wash, Wells Fargo did have a mail house up there. Stagecoach would come through and people would go up there to get the mail to bring it down into Littlefield. The foundation is still there up in under those cottonwood trees. Anyone else? I know we're running about out of time here. Everybody's getting tired. Go ahead, Jack. Call her off.
She won't let me.
Oh,
So I guess.
go ahead. I'll let you.
I'm gonna do it. I mean, two stories that I've got to tell about.
Okay.
And long as I'll never get another chance. I get out of the Marine Corps, come to Beaver Dam. I've never been here. We just went through. But anyway, I won't have a job. So my father-in-law says he's running this station here, and he run it during the time I was in the Marine Corps. He said, you and Mabel.
Speak loud, Jack.
You and Mabel take over the station. I've got to take care of my farm. So that was great. We decided that would be. So we ran the station. Now one night, in order to have lots of people stop, he had started a little zoo up above the station, and he had a sign along the highway, stop and let our kids see your, or let our monkeys see your kids. And people would stop and let our monkeys see your kids, and people would stop. They'd go up and see the monkeys, and they'd come down and buy gas from them, great things. So we took it over, and we ran, and we got a few more things in the zoo, and we sent to a place called, in Texas, called Snake King. And we got some snakes, and I built a pit up there where we had that little zoo, and put these snakes in there, and then we got monkeys and a little honey bear. So the first day we got these things that shipped in, we put them up where they were in cages, and they would run. And the honey bear was in a little cage in there. In the middle of the night, I was awakened, or Mabel was awakened. Mabel screaming. We slept outside. We didn't have coolers at that time. It was hot. So we were sleeping out here in a cot. come down and was lonesome and crawled in bed with Mabel. Messing around with her hair, and she didn't care for that. So I took the honey bear, and I went around, and the service station had restrooms, a woman's restroom here and a man's restroom here, and then the station. And I didn't know what to do with the thing, and my bare feet, and I didn't want to go up the zoos. So I took the bear, and I opened the restroom, ladies' side of the restroom, and stuck him in there, and I said, I'll get him in the morning, and I went back and found him out on the cot. All of a sudden, there was a scream, and Mabel, the honey bear, had gotten out, come around, and had climbed up in the bed, and was up there with Mabel, and was getting messing around with her hair, and she screamed, and that poor little guy just scared him to death. So that was, and so I put him back in the restroom, and all of a sudden we heard the scream up there, and some tourist had come down early in the morning, and the lady went to get into the restroom. She opened that door, and here's a honey bear sitting on the potty. The story of the honey bear. But anyway, we were right pioneers in that service station up on the hill. I had another story.
Okay, Jack,
It's too late.
is there, yeah, thank you.
I just wanted.
Gary,
On the honey bear story, did you not, when this lady screamed, you went and got the bear? No, she screamed and ran to the car.
Yeah.
You went and got the bear, and
And put it in there, and then the first thing you know, she was telling her husband there was a bear in there.
yes.
And then she took him around, and they opened the door, and there was no bear. And the last we saw her go down the street, honey, I saw the honey bear. Now we got it straight. Okay, the other thing is, we had the snake pit, and I got these big snakes from Texas in there, and people could look in this pit and see these snakes. So one morning I got up and I thought, just to have some fun. There was as I come over the hill from St. George, a baker came down to bring baked goods down to Mesquite to sell down here because they didn't have a bakery here. And every morning he'd come over the hill and down into take it over to Mesquite and over to the lodge. So this day I got the snake that had the snakes in there, and I thought, well, I'll have a little fun with that guy. So I got the snakes, and I took one snake and put the tail in the mouth of the other snake, and made a great big long snake. And I went out and I laid that snake on the road, with the two snakes, and then they covered the whole road. And then I went over in a ditch, and I watched. Here he came over the hill. I was waiting for him. Woo! Whee! The screech of the tires as he stopped, and he got out, and he looked around there, and he just. But before he got back to the place where he had gotten turned around, I ran out and grabbed the snakes and took them and hid them back where I was. And he came back, and he got out and looked, and he looked, and he couldn't find the snakes anywhere. And he got back down to the store down here, and then the Mesquite and always down there. And I saw the snake, this big, long snake, clear across the road. But it disappeared, but I saw it, and that's the surprise on his face. So anyway, I had a lot of fun.
so everybody in the valley was trying to find that big snake.
I don't want to take too much time, but I couldn't.
Do you ladies have anything, one last thing you'd like to say?
No.
Well, I sure want to thank you. We appreciate you coming and appreciate you being here. And if there's no more questions, they have a whole lot more. You just got to prime them. Thank you.